Let's call this architecture. If I can spell good grief, that is so bad. Architecture. All right, security architecture. What we need to do here is we need to protect our perimeter and our clients and servers. Okay? This, remember, is a layered defense. Okay? We've been talking so far about, we sort of have the internet. Then we would put in, for now, we've been saying we had a router, and then we would have our network. Okay? And now we need to discuss sort of how do things get really set up. And what we need to talk about now is what a firewall does. So let me just draw here. I'll draw another diagram. Okay, so if I have the internet here, I'm going to have a firewall. I'll just put an F. The firewall is a network device, and it separates our network. We'll call this internal network. Okay. And inside our internal network, we will have desktops. Notice that I always put a circle on those like it's an old CRT. Well, I'm old. So we'll put on here clients. We also might have important servers that we don't want bad people to get to. All right? Oops. So a firewall has 3 ports. The internet port we call untrust. Okay? So the internet is where we don't trust people. That's where the bad guys live. Our internal network, we call it trust. And generally speaking, we don't allow people from the internet to access things internally, but we do allow our clients to access things externally. So let's say over here, there's a normal website. We want our clients to be able to access these websites. Okay? So rule number 1, no external connections allowed to internal hosts. Okay? So anything coming in from untrust as a connection opening will not be allowed to go into trust. But where do we put our web server? We have a 3rd port on our router, and we will call this one the DMZ port. Well, that's what people just call it. We will call it. I didn't just invent that name. It's DMZ. In this port, we're going to have a subnet, which is going to have, for example, our web server, and it will have our email server. Okay? Because if we want to get, or if we want people to access our corporate website, they need to be able to get to our server. They need to be able to send us emails. Okay? So external connections to the DMZ allowed by port and IP address. Okay? And what I'm going to show you now, I'll just flip this over. Speaking of wasting paper. Have you got that down? I might go back to this, so leave a little space on yours too. So what you have inside the firewall or stored in its memory is a firewall access control list. And I'll start with 2 of them. What we'll have normally in the thing is an IP address. So So there's going to be a column for IP address. Make a nice big column there. We're going to have a source port. And we will have a destination port. Then we'll have an interface. And then we will have, I think I have this all. There's another column, and I'm not going to do it though. And then we'll just have, I don't remember what we call that last column. Then we just decide if we're going to allow or deny. All right? So I'm going to flip back over. Sorry, it doesn't all fit on one page. So if we look back here, I'm flipping back to the diagram. We need a rule that says people from the internet, so our nice customers out here, I want them to be able to get to, for example, our web server. Okay? Now, I understand that when someone is sending a message to a web server, they use a certain port. What port is that? It's port 80. And remember, it's the destination port, right? So coming from here, going through, the TCP segment is going to say port 80 on it, and then it will say the actual IP address of that web server. So we'll flip this back over. You just drew your line, right? So if I put the IP address here of my web server, so that is the actual IP address, I don't care about the source port. Usually you put all here, source port all, destination port 80, and coming in on untrust, you write the name, or you pick the interface you're on, and then here you say allow. Okay? So what this tells us is a packet with the destination IP address of this. On the TCP segment, it doesn't matter what the source port says. If the destination port says 80 and it's on this interface, we will allow it. Okay? So let's just note here. I'm going to go back to the other side. You guys writing down real fast. Flipping back over. And I'm just going to note here on number 3 for firewalls, the rules cover IP addresses. Notice I said IP addresses, so I can deny entire subnets if I want. So I've got IP addresses. I have ports. That is source or destination. I can have, what did I just put on here? Source port. It can be different depending on the interface. And then finally, I can do the type of traffic. And we didn't really get into that a lot, but that was like TCP, UDP. Y'all remember that stuff? TCP, UDP, or ICMP. So it's the type of traffic. Traffic type, okay? I didn't put a traffic type column on here. This is big enough. All right, so what do you think would be if my email server, let's say, is .35, so 128.82.212.35 is my email, and I want people to be able to send me email. You guys remember what the port number of email was? It's 25. So is that going to be source or destination? The destination port of 25. Remember, I put all here because that's going to be an ephemeral port. Y'all remember that? I'll talk about your the other question just came in, and I'll talk about it in a second. So this is still on untrust, and then here we're going to allow. Yeah, I'll get to that question actually in just a second. So let's go back here. Now, there might be sometimes, there is actually a rule if I want people here, so inside, if I want them to be able to access sort of anything they want, I can put in a rule for that. So I can put IP address of any, or I can put in my subnet range. I'm not going to write it though, I just put any though. Because this is going to be on the trust side. For my source port, I might put the ephemeral port numbers. So I might put greater than 49153. Destination port, I might allow all and just put allow. So this here would allow outgoing connections. Okay. It would be better here to put my actual subnet though, if you're doing it right. So we should put that in. So I put like 128.82.212 and then a /24, but anyway. So you guys get the idea there. Okay, so I want to allow sort of outgoing connections. I can also block certain ones. We talked about, for example, YouTube. And if I want to block people, I can block ranges. So if I get here and they want to go here, I can block that range. And so here again, I'm going to go, if I know YouTube's subnet, remember we talked about in Pakistan they were going to block them? This is the way they should have really done it. You would just type in their address range, and I'll just make something up, 8.223.42.0. Notice here I'm just going to put a /24. So that blocks the whole subnet. Source port all. If I want to just block the whole thing, I would just put all. I could put 80 in here though if I just wanted to block the. So that's on the trusted interface. So this is my clients coming out. I don't want them to go to that IP address range, and so I hit deny here. Okay. And let me just bring it down to the bottom. I still am going to get to that other question. I would have normally a default row. So I have my zeroed row. All. And I can put any here. So this is defaulting of anything. And the last row should be deny. Okay? So by default, I should deny. I'll put an exclamation mark there. All right, so let me just show you back here sort of what, or let me just put the last rule. One of the last rules, and I'll just put this as number 4 because I do have a little space here. Number 4, the firewall goes through the rules in order. I don't know how I could say this better. The first rule that applies is applied. How does that sound? So what happens is the access control list, if I go here, they can get really long. And as soon as it finds a rule that applies, it follows that rule and then it's done. Okay? And so here, if someone's accessing our web server, this is allowed, so it's just allowed and it stops. It doesn't get to the bottom. So it goes through. Yeah, this is. Yeah, this is these aren't nested ifs. They're just, or yeah, they are. I guess you're right. Yeah, it's like, you know. Anyway, it just goes through in order. Once it's done, it's done. Yeah. I don't know, what is this? A do loop, and then when it does the do, then it exits the loop. So anyway, as soon as a rule applies, it's done. The reason we have this one at the bottom as deny is, by default, you want people to not. You don't want them to, we'll just put in quotes, just get in. If there's a real tendency here, and I've done this myself, so I'm telling you not to do it, and that is that bottom rule to flip it over to allow, because what that means is you're allowing by default anything, and that's not good. It's a big hassle though, because you have to have a rule for every kind of traffic you're going to allow. So if you're denying by default, people are going to be calling you up and saying, hey, I can't get here, I can't get there.